Sound design and
My name is Macy Schmidt, and I am an orchestrator and music director, as well as the founder of the Broadway Sinfonietta. I kind of latched on to cast albums at an early high school age, as I'm sure many of us did, and really latched on to the big orchestra cast albums. I would listen to a cast album, sans the overture, skip the overture. And then after I listened to every other track, I would try to make my own overture, and then I would listen to the actual overture to see what they did and if I liked mine better. But I just was always very interested in manipulating music and how different arrangements can make you feel different ways. And so it was kind of a slow burn unfolding the interest, and an even slower burn unfolding that it was a career, because no one tells you that it's a career.
Hi, I'm Jessica Paz, sound designer of Hadestown. I was working at a community theater, and I had been a stage manager for a while. And there was a particular show that I loved very much. It was Bat Boy the Musical, actually. And the sound was just, there was problems. And I thought, well, maybe I could hop in and fix it, and I did, and we finally had a show that didn't have feedback, and I was like, oh wow, this is really fascinating. I didn't know I could do that. So I started mixing, and then I just kept going from there. Somehow I just fell in love with it. It was really fun and tedious and felt like something I would never quite be able to figure out, you know? And I'm still learning to this day.
Hi, my name is Sammy Canold, and I am a director. My parents tell me the story of how when I was a toddler, my favorite pastime was to sit at the bathroom counter with the little shampoo bottles that you get from hotel rooms and put on little shows with them on the bathroom counter. And so they claimed that, they knew I was gonna be a director since I was 3 years old. I don't think that's entirely possible, but definitely the interest in theater, the interest in moving people around in space, the interest in patterns, I fell in love with it really early.
Hi, I'm Tweed McCallum, and I'm a sound designer. I was a student at Howard University in Washington, D.C., and they produce a lot of famous actors and dancers, but a lot of people don't know they have a technical theater program, which is what I was in. When I was there, they didn't have a sound program, and they still don't, unfortunately, but we produced a lot of student musicals and plays that I was a dresser for. So standing backstage, waiting behind the wings for my actors to come off, I became amazed with speakers and microphones from a distance, although I never got the opportunity to touch it when I was there. It wasn't until I moved to New York in 2018 and got my first job that I started learning sound for the first time.
I'm Valerie Lau-Key. I'm the producing director at Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS. Prior to that, I've been a stage manager and performer. As a performer, it allowed me into the theatrical community. I took that background of the dance that I had poured my training into, and I got a chance to be on stage. I used that time traveling on the road to spend every day that I could watching load-ins and load-outs. I watched the process of what it took to make the magic happen. And that was even more magical to me than the heat of the lights, the audience, and I found when I was a stage manager that it tied all of those things that I love doing together. Sometimes people say, what do stage managers do? And sometimes I'll say, they make the scenery dance. As a dancer, I enjoyed that. And you're bringing something to life that brings all of those pieces together. So that's why I really enjoyed going from performing to being backstage.
The orchestrator is basically responsible for, like, if you go to the New York Phil and you see a big symphony playing a bunch of parts, or honestly, if you go to a Broadway musical and you hear a big orchestra, the orchestrator decided what every single instrument was going to play. A composer will write a song that often, but not always, is written on one particular instrument. Maybe it's piano, maybe it's guitar, and then the orchestrator will take that song and kind of expand it and assign a part to every instrument in the orchestra, fitted to how big or small that orchestra is.
Out of everyone on the design team, sound designers truly have the responsibility of bringing something to the story that people literally do not see.
When you get a Broadway space, you just get 4 walls, right? You get 4 walls, maybe some internet and, seats. And we bring in everything completely custom for every show.
The sound designer is supposed to create a visceral experience for someone watching the show, not only with sound effects and helping with music, but also making sure that the actors on stage can be heard clearly. And one thing that I love about sound is it's just as scientific and mathematic as it is creative.
Every microphone that's on every actor, every microphone on every instrument, every speaker, how it's processed, the way the microphones are EQ'd or tuned for every show is completely and totally custom.
So Evita has been and will always be my favorite musical. I think there was something about Ava's drive and determination and just put a female character on stage and unabashedly say, this is what I want. And to also show the ugly and the bad sides of that was really cataclysmic for me to see. It is a great privilege and an honor to tell true stories. I think that it is the responsibility of the director to deeply consider how they portray reality in terms of how they portray historical fact. And for me in my process, really what that usually sort of manifests as is doing a ton of research to make sure that I am being as faithful to reality as I can be if that's the mandate of the show, or if I'm deviating from reality, I'm doing it for a reason. And so I think that in the case of a show like Evita, it was really, really important to me to understand as much historically as I possibly could.
I do a few things on Hadestown. One is that I time all of the reverb, all of the special effects to the BPM of the music so that it very, very specifically fits. Either it wants to be very tight or very long and lush. Another trick that we use, which is one of my favorites, is we have an oscillator that's running throughout the entire show with a gate on it that opens whenever the kick drum is hit. So we add like a 2 millisecond thump of 60 or 55 hertz, I believe, is how we've tuned it to match the key of the music. 10 milliseconds, just like long booms, which take you on that journey out of the underworld. It's a bit jarring. You're just like, what? Wow, okay. And momentous, right? It meant a lot, not just to me, but for the representation of women in this field. And I hope it means, a lot to some young woman who maybe wants to move into this field to go, oh, when I watch the Tonys, I'm not just gonna see men up there. I'm not just gonna see cisgendered white men up there. I'm going to see people of color, and I'm going to see women. I'm going to see women of color. And I can do this too.
The Broadway Sinfonietta is an all-female identifying and majority women of color orchestra that is designed to showcase how excellent BIPOC women musicians are. Leading up to the pandemic, I'd become increasingly conscious of just the lack of women of color who do what I do, or the lack of women of color that I would even see in the rooms that I was in. And when I had put myself forward for shows that were gonna have a traditionally white Broadway sound, I would get responses that's like, oh, well, you haven't done work at this scale, you haven't done that kind of work. And I was like, well, that's the kind of work that is, that's the kind of work that is how my musical voice has been built. I had a feeling that it was the same for women of color instrumentalists too. And so the Sinfonietta originally started in my mind as like, it was sort of conceived as a one-off. I was like, I want to make a video of this song that I'd had an arrangement in my mind that I'd wanted to create for a really long time. I want to do it in like a big Broadway with a capital B sort of energy. And I want as many women of color as I possibly can have to play on it. And I just kind of want to like make a little statement with that and be like, look, like we can do this kind of music too. We can do this kind of music really well. And the response was so much more enthusiastic than I had expected. And so it grew and has become not only a much bigger thing, but like the majority of my full-time work is now spent on this project, which it just became bigger than I could have ever dreamed of. Yeah, I love it.
Being the first woman of color sound designer on Broadway, and so far, number 9 out of a list of women sound designers on Broadway, is very scary. It was scary when I first got hired. It was scary through tech, and it's still scary after the show opens. Of course, I'm happy for myself, but the nervousness comes in when I think about I have the responsibility of making sure my work is good enough that other women of color will start getting hired, not in 10 years, but in 2022 when more of these new shows open. So I'm carrying this burden of, if other women of color do not get on these new shows, does that mean I did something wrong?
Everyone says like there aren't that many, but really there are. We just, I think prior to now, haven't been paying very much attention to them.
What the data shows is that we female directors, particularly musicals, are all over the place in regional theaters and in nonprofits and off-Broadway. But then when it comes to making the jump to Broadway, there's a fall off, and it's pretty drastic.
It's a very male-dominated industry, and that's not true just of audio for theater. It's true for audio in general, or any sort of engineering field, right?
Almost every orchestrator I've ever spoken to can point to a mentor. And there's actually this amazing book, it's called The Sound of Broadway Music. The author's name escapes me in this moment, but it kind of traces the like lineage of mentorship over the past like 150 years in Broadway orchestration. There's rarely, if ever, a woman mentioned in the book.
But there are so many women of different races who I know, who I'm friends with, who I've worked with, who have hired me for jobs, who are out here, who I think are more than qualified to be doing a bunch of these shows.
We mentor people who remind us of ourselves. Like you mentor somebody who's like, that's a mini-me. And so for literally centuries, like mini-me's have always looked a certain way. And I think that the reason there are not more women in this field is because in a craft where you kind of have to like luck out with a mentor to make your way into that, the odds are very, very clearly stacked against people who don't fit into that demographic.
I think of directing a musical as running a business or being the coach of a major sports team, because you are often working with 100 different people who are reporting to different people, but ultimately it's coming back to you and the producers. And so I think people see that role as the role of like a CEO, and we know what statistics tell us about women in high-level positions in business, generally speaking. So I think we're suffering from the sort of the same stigmas. I think the importance of having women on creative teams can't be overstated, and not just one woman.
I sometimes wonder, like, how did I think, like, what made me think that I could come in here and do this? Because it surely wasn't seeing somebody who looked like me do the things that I am doing.
We need to have more stories being told that illuminate a world that we want people to see.
I also want people to be paid enough for their work, respected for their work.
Or telling women's stories. Of course they should be part of that creative process. It's their experience, right?
It's essential for people who have a marginalized experience to have a voice in telling those stories, or they're gonna get told wrong.
The nuances of how we are spoken to, of how we are treated, of the expectations can only be seen from our viewpoint.
It helps to bring another perspective to a story that's not often there.
I don't think it's enough to see those people in assistant roles. I think we need to see like leaders who represent all backgrounds and genders and races and whatnot, so that people who don't have a mom like I did telling me that I could do anything that I wanted will see those people and believe that they can get there.
It's important to broaden our audience, to broaden our stories, and then we will be able to broaden the representation of both women and people of color in our creative teams. I don't know that it will ever be enough. You know, I think it's about what is the story, who is telling the story. The number of women on a team will be about the story we wish to tell.
We should never be opening a playbill and seeing a team that contains all white men.
The people who are already in power, whether that's a general manager, producer, artistic director, or director, is for them to make a conscious decision to hire someone else.
The statistics on female directors on Broadway, particularly of musicals, are still pretty atrocious.
We should never be looking at a name in a playbill that's like, oh, that's the one woman.
Not simply to fill a gender gap, but with keeping in mind that women are just as capable as a man of doing these jobs.
We don't want to hit a quota. There's no quota involved with making things better.
It'll be when we don't feel like we need to push it anymore.
More than what it is now.
We should always pursue that end goal of more. You just get started.
We spend a lot of time talking about like going to school and studying the craft and gaining the skills, and like that's all like great. And then what, you get the degree and the skills and you like touch down in New York and you have the skills, but you don't know anyone. So I would just encourage people to be bold in what you ask for.
Do not underestimate the opportunity to connect with people.
Not to be afraid of reaching out to someone you don't know.
My advice would be do everything. Like be an A2, be an A1, haul cable across a football field, push boxes.
Any opportunity in any corner of the theater is valuable for people who want to become directors.
You know, be a stage manager. Like, you don't even have to do audio stuff, but if you want to be working in theater, you know, direct something. Don't ever lose sight of your own creativity in order to facilitate your bread and butter job. Just don't stop being curious and do all the things, do all the jobs, you know. I feel like I'm a better sound designer than I could have been because I know how to build a mic rig. I think we have to learn how to be better at opening the pipeline.
Some of the existing structures that exist in our industry are not meant for us. They're not meant to let new people in. They're not designed for new voices or new talent.
We also are in the midst of a moment where we're catering to an audience that's not ready to hear it.
It has taken me until this point in my career to be like, oh, you just have to build your own ladder. You just have to build your own new room, where you aren't asking anybody to be let in because you are the person letting people in. And I wish I'd known that many years ago. Would have saved me a lot of banging on doors.
I'm quick, inspired, then wired from ambition that is seeping out my skin. For hire, admired, so green, the potential is just waiting to kick in. I sail a brand new ship unseen by the people of the patriarchal plains. But I'm tired of navigating, they're underestimating me. I'm my own best kept secret. They're happy I keep it, so they keep it. But it's time to build a bar and then I'll leap it. Set fire to the shadows and make my own light.
She fought our war in boardroom and tennis court. She flew and then she climbed. She ran her race while chased by opponents, but she crossed that finish line.
Until we're condescended to and pursued, looked over, looked at, and then looked through.
She is unknown, unwritten, will revive the woman hidden. I'm my own best kept secret, and they're happy I keep it, so they keep it. But it's time to build a bar and then I'll leap it. Set fire to the shadows, make my own light.
Someday I'll play my hand and call his bluff.
We'll reminisce about this stuff.
When we were green and days were rough,
We'll fill the room and be
and
enough.
she'll pick up the phone to call her up, and we'll reminisce about this stuff.
We were broke, broken up.
About our wage and their rebuffs.
Enough is enough, is enough, is enough.
Enough is enough, is enough, is enough.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm my own best kept secret,
But I'm not gonna keep it, I won't keep it.
but it's time to build a bar and then I'll leave
I'll
it.
leave it. Set fire to the shadows.
Set fire to the shadows.
Set fire
To the shadows, make our own light.
I think we should always strive to be better and hold the door open for another woman.